Welcome back to the YouTube home for BamaOnline.com. BOL senior analyst Travis Reier alongside Bama Online senior writer Charlie Potter. It is the day after, Charlie, round one of the 2024 NFL draft. We're going to talk about three more selections from the Nick Sabin era at the University of Alabama on Thursday night. We'll get into some guys now that are on the clock moving forward in this draft. We'll also talk about Nick Saban and kind of, I guess, his true debut, more so when the fall rolls around, I think, but was sort of billed as such for Nick Saban on the draft coverage Thursday night with ESPN, ABC. We'll talk about that. And then perhaps another transfer target from the portal for this Alabama football team, a guy with familiarity as it relates to the Alabama coaching staff. No doubt about that. But Charlie, let's start with round one. We had set the over under here on the YouTube home for BOL at really 3.5 for first rounders. I think the wild card in all of that was Kool-Aid McKinstry, because pretty much unanimously you had seen JC Latham, you had seen Dallas Turner, you had seen Terrion Arnold in some first rounds. A month or so ago, there was uncertainty about Kool-Aid. Now, Kool-Aid with the foot injury, but then responded with a solid pro day performance. Ultimately, though, it is the three primary options that did have their names called in Detroit in round one. How did that strike you to see Kool-Aid sort of fall out of that mix?
Yeah, it sucks to see just because you've covered him since he was a high school recruit. But it was a weird draft, man. We were talking about it before we started recording. Just the run of offensive players there in the first half, 14 straight picks for quarterbacks, offensive tackles, and wide receivers. It was a weird draft because just in general, you had no off-ball linebackers, no safeties, no running backs, but that's not that new taken in the first round. So it was the skill guys on the outside at wide receiver and corner. You had your offensive tackles, your defensive linemen, and of course, the run of quarterback, 6 in the first 12 picks. So once it started to shape up the way it did, you kind of started to wonder, okay, what's going to happen with these corners? And I think there were 3 that came off the board. Terrion Arnold was he was the second corner going to the Lions at 24, who traded up to take him. But once it started to shape up like that, and you saw some teams late in the first kind of, I don't want to say reach, because you never know what's going to happen with some of these guys, but for wide receivers, you started to kind of see what was going to happen for Kool-Aid. But he's a guy, I think tonight, he's not going to have to wait very long. There's teams at the top of the second round that need cornerback help. There are teams that can move up to take him. But yeah, it's kind of sucks for him. But we've seen guys, fall to the second round to have great NFL careers. Derrick Henry comes to mind. I mean, I know that's at a different position, but Landon Collins. Most recently here, you had Brian Branch, Xavier McKinney. Xavier McKinney is a guy that just signed a huge deal with the Packers and slipped to the second round. Reggie Ragland, you can go on and on. But I think with Kool-Aid, you maybe would have wanted to end up in the later part of the first round because you go to a better organization. But again, he won't have to wait too long tonight.
Yeah, the draft was sort of another example of why more and more young football players want to play offense, right?
Yeah.
Because if it comes down to it these days, and there are elite wide receivers for the taking, teams are going to go with wide receivers. I totally get it. I would pick offense over defense these days. The game is set up for the offense. Rules are set up for the offense. So it was very interesting to see all those offensive guys still go 6 quarterbacks in the top 12. Bo Nix going top 12. That kind of blew my mind. But hey, good for him. He did exactly what he needed to do, leaving Auburn, going to Oregon, made some nice coin, I'm sure, with the Ducks, and now he's a top 12 pick in an NFL draft. That's how quarterback needy that league is. But yeah, when the run on just defensive players in general doesn't start until about what, 15?
Yeah.
It's going to be tough. And it was tough for Dallas Turner. Dallas Turner sat there in the green room longer than most people expected. But we'll start with JC Latham because he was a top 10 pick going 7th overall to the Tennessee Titans. I thought it was interesting, sort of in his media work following his selection by the Tennessee Titans, that he talked about he's going to left tackle. I mean, that's the plan. We had talked about that so much with him during his time at Alabama, never really came to fruition, but it's apparently going to happen. I'm sure the Titans are hoping that since Taylor Lewan's retirement, they have had no answer there, and perhaps JC can be that guy for Will Levis.
Yeah, I mean that is the big news out of his pick, and good for JC. You know, second offensive tackle off the board, going in the top 10. He's the 10th offensive lineman of the Nick Saban era in the first round. That says a lot about the players they've been able to produce. But no, it's a situation in Tennessee where you don't have Derrick Henry coming back, so it's going to look a little different. They may not be as ground and pound as they've been in the past, but you're right. They need to solidify that blindside spot. And it is a position where JC kind of seemed like he was going to inherit it at Alabama, but just never moved over from the right side. You obviously had Caden Proctor at left tackle last year, and he progressed as the season moved on. But it'll be interesting to see how he can handle that transition. I think it's something that he wants to do. I think all offensive linemen, especially if you're a tackle, you know what kind of money you can get on the left side of that offensive line protecting the quarterback's blind side. So I think for him, it's a good landing spot. And I'll just be interested to see what the Titans look like this fall because it's going to be a little bit of a different makeup on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, you got Calvin Ridley going in there at the wide receiver position. You mentioned it. No more Derrick Henry, putting a lot on Will Levis to
Hmm.
be the guy at the quarterback position. It looks like there's some weaponry there at the wide receiver spot. Again, offensive line, an area that the Titans desperately needed to address. And then Dallas Turner. There had been so much mockery, I guess we'll call it, about Dallas going number 8 to the Atlanta Falcons. That to me was one of the big surprises of the top 10. I like Michael Penix Jr. as a quarterback. I didn't have Atlanta as a potential destination for him in the top 10 picks. That's the way it plays out. And once that happened, you started to wonder, wow, now where does Dallas go? And so the Vikings, they eventually trade up to 10 to get JJ McCarthy. Then they trade back up to 17 to get Dallas Turner. I'm not sure if that duo is going to work out for the Vikings like CJ Stroud, Will Anderson has for the Texans. But there's some parallels to be drawn there. And, Dallas has his name called there in the mid teens.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking about. Minnesota's wanting to strike the same goal that Houston did last year. Now they didn't have to be as high up in the draft at 2 and 3, but they had to move up to get both of those guys. And it's good to see an Alabama player in Minnesota. I think the Vikings have a great uniform combo, but I do think that for Dallas, it was surprising to see him drop out of the top 15 because you're right. I mean, Atlanta just kind of with the bomb at the draft, they really blew the whole thing up. And that run on offensive players, I think you can thank Atlanta for that because teams started to scramble. You had another quarterback come off the board in the top 10, and then just kind of chaos from there a little bit. But yeah, I think he ends up in a good spot. You don't have Kirk Cousins anymore. He's now in Atlanta. But Minnesota's been a solid organization for a while. And I think for him, he's going to have an opportunity to come in and compete off the edge. And I think, he's going to have an opportunity in the NFC North with some solid quarterbacks now because Caleb Williams is in Detroit. You still have Jared Goff or Caleb Williams is in Chicago. Jared Goff's in Detroit, and Jordan Love had a solid year last year. So he should have a lot of fun up there.
Yeah, and when my Jags traded out of 17 with the Vikings, the Jags were a prime potential landing spot for Terrion
Yeah.
Arnold. So it was good news for Dallas that the Vikings were moving up there because you didn't think they were going up to take a DB. But with the Jags trading down to 23, again, that that sort of deferred the run on corners another pick or two at least. And when you thought about the potential for Alabama getting 4, you knew that run on corners needed to get going here pretty
Hmm.
quickly if Kool-Aid was going to find his way into the back end of the first round. But, you think about it, I think things worked out pretty well for Terrion Arnold. He goes to a very good team in the Detroit Lions. There's going to be familiarity on the back end with Brian Branch already there. Some other Alabama guys like Jameer Gibbs, Jamison Williams. So I like it. I liked it for Terry and Arnold, Charlie.
Yeah, no doubt. I think he liked it too. He was super excited on stage. Hell, he doesn't even have to get on a flight today. He's already in Detroit. But no, when the draft started to shape up, we saw it seemed like the Eagles, Terrion just kind of fell in their lap. And the Eagles have been amazing in the draft the last few years. And they've been very high on taking Alabama and Georgia players. And it just kind of seemed like, well, damn, the Eagles did it again. But they took Quinyon Mitchell from Toledo and Nick Saban, little nugget on the ABC broadcast, talking about how that's a guy that they had hoped entered the transfer portal because he was kind of number one on their board in terms of corners. We saw how
A
that
lot of
shaped
my
out.
social media timeline took as tampering,
Yeah,
tampering. And if you want to equate it to that, go get Nick Saban, I guess, in retirement, right?
right, right. Like, but also, like, what are they supposed to do? Wait till these guys get in the portal to
You don't think there's intel before these
right?
guys make these decisions, really? I mean,
Exactly.
come on.
But I think Quinyon Mitchell's a great player. He was really good at the combine, so he could be a good pickup for the Eagles. But with Terrion going 24th to the Lions, you mentioned it. He's going to be in the same secondary as Brian Branch. He can play on the boundary. That's the Lions team. That's a lot of fun to watch. That's a team that was one game away from playing for a Super Bowl last year. And then now this is three straight drafts that they've selected an Alabama player in the first round with Jameson Williams 2 years ago, Jameer Gibbs last year, and then now Terrion Arnold. So they're not quite up to the Eagles yet, but they're getting close. And I think that Terrion, though, he goes to a great situation. That city's going to love that kid, and he should be in for a good rookie season.
How about draft night fits? If we talk about JC and Dallas and Terrion, give me some power rankings for the fits, the accessories. Um, Dallas, after having to sweat that weight, he's on with a group that included CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud told Dallas he had a top five worst outfit in draft history with the sort of limeish look, I guess.
I didn't mind it. I thought it looked pretty
Yeah.
sharp on him. He wore the sunglasses all night. That's a choice.
Yeah.
And Dallas is also going back to I think even Alabama's banquet when he was named a team captain. He's a big fan of those big old Converse. They're not quite Chuck Taylors, but they're a little thicker. He wears the hell out of those, man. I think he even wore them into a black tie event for whichever defensive award he was up for, maybe the Benerick. But I didn't think it was bad. I thought Terrion was the best
Yeah.
with the kind of like the light salmon, and then of course when you have the inside the jacket that's personalized, it's tough to beat that. I thought all three guys looked pretty good though. I know Dallas's dad was doing a good job of kind of documenting it on social media. He had all three of them beside each other. He even had a photo with Jalen Milrow with the trio. But I don't think it's a situation where those guys are going to look back and be like, "What the hell was I
Yeah.
thinking?" And maybe now Dallas has some peer pressure from his now NFL peers, but I think for the most part, I didn't look at it and turn my nose up.
Yeah, it's like the smaller guys go with the bigger colors, and the bigger guys go with the more subtle type of look, the darker
That's fair.
colors,
Yeah,
you
it's
know?
it's slimming.
Yeah, streamlining a little bit for sure. Someone else who stood out on draft night, Nick Saban, as we talked about a little bit here earlier. The Quinyon Mitchell comments certainly struck. I found them fascinating because you're always wondering, what might have been now where the portal is concerned. And when you look at Mitchell and where he went in this draft, it would be understandable for Alabama to have certainly done its homework on him. And you think about some guys that they did go with last
Mhm,
season, like a Trey Amos,
mhm.
and maybe how that board shook out with some of those options on the back end of the defense. I know we talked about this a little bit too earlier off air. The utilization of Nick Saban, him kind of finding his place, which you wouldn't think would be all that hard given that he's Nick frickin' Saban. But there's some egos and there's some stars already on that set, Charlie.
Yeah, no doubt. He did a couple hours on College Game Day, and that was a bigger desk. There were a bunch more voices. But once they got into their draft coverage on ABC, it was him and Herbie and Desmond and Reese Davis, of course, was the host. And I think he waits his turn. He's not as aggressive as he probably would be in a meeting room. I think that's pretty safe to say. But when he did speak up, though, I think he was great. I don't think that comes as a surprise as he was able to be successful just talking football. It was kind of it was funny because with that, whether it was the Quinyon Mitchell thing, he kind of went in on Amarius Mims too at Georgia, and
Yeah,
people start to be like, "What is that about?" You don't think Nick Saban's probably talked to a guy that knows a lot about Amarius
a
Mims?
couple of guys maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that I can't. Now I'm forgetting who it was. It's a player that had neck surgery, and it's the same surgery Justin Boygby had. And Saban dropped a little nugget that he had the same surgery.
Well, he loved Rome Odunze too,
Oh yeah, yeah,
with the lung issue or
yeah.
collapsed lung against Arizona. Had to truck it back to Seattle. Couldn't fly, and then bye week, and he plays against Oregon and has a huge impactful uh, situation with that game. Yeah, he likes those kind. Those are definitely Nick Saban kind of guys,
Absolutely, and he
as we
was
know.
he was complimentary of a lot of the SEC guys too. Jaden Daniels, Malik Neighbors. He loves him some Brock Bowers. So it was. I think it was measured. He had good opinions either way. He would tell you when he thinks a guy needs to improve, and I think that's good. Like it wasn't the 3 hour fest of or 4 hour fest, I guess, of here was the worst moment of this guy's life. But Nick Saban's also not sugarcoating some guys where they had some flaws, and I think that's refreshing. And he also lit up when the Alabama guys came off the board. The Terrion Arnold pick, you could tell how much that he and Miss Terry care about Terrion. The moment that he shared with Jalen Milrow when he was talking to Laura Rutledge in the green room. And speaking of Laura Rutledge, my God, she was fighting for her life in there with some of those interviews. Uh,
To me, she's the MVP of
yeah,
ESPN as a network right now. All the different roles that she handles between the different sports. I mean, she was at the Masters here recently.
right.
And then she can get into that situation like you're talking about and more than hold her own and do so with extreme grace. It's amazing to me. She's amazing.
Yeah, she was great. And I,
Yeah.
I mean, we've talked about this. I'm an NFL Network guy when it comes to the draft, so that was kind of tough to watch ABC. But it was overall it was good. I think that I don't know how the ESPN broadcast went at all. I know just judging from the message board, people weren't a fan of it. But I thought with adding Nick Saban into this, and he'll be on there again tonight. I think it just amplifies the product, and I do think this is his debut because he was on TV tonight longer than he'll ever be in the fall on a single day. But I think it's a precursor of what to expect for College Game Day in the fall. And I think that College Game Day got better because it's a product that, while still popular, needed some help. And I think Nick Saban could do that.
I can't tell you the last time, and no knock, the show is successful. There's no arguing that. But to your point, I'm going to watch College Game Day a hell of a lot more in 2024 than I have probably the previous 10 years combined. In 2024, I'm going to watch it much more with Nick Saban on there because I feel like, as you said, I'm going to learn something.
Right.
Even like you said, how he talked about Jaden Daniels and how, okay, you rush four and you spy him with a fifth guy. Well, you can't play zone now against Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. and all those guys that LSU has. That's the type of stuff I want
Yeah.
when I watch coverage like that. And Nick Saban's going to have it each and every week. So when we think ahead now to the next 2 days in the NFL draft and what's left for Alabama guys, well, obviously Kool-Aid McKinstry, you expect to have his name called early on today in round two. Chris Braswell comes to mind, and Jermaine Burton too, as you pointed out before we went on. Other guys, Justin Aboybe, Jace McClellan, Will Reichard. Is that kind of the pool of guys that you're looking at here moving forward?
Yeah, I think today the three that could come off. Well, obviously Kool-Aid's not going to have to wait long. I don't think Chris Braswell will either. But Jermaine Burton's the third guy for me because you look at the first round. There were plenty of edge rushers that went, although it was in the second half because that run on offensive players. There's still plenty on the board, and Chris Braswell's among that group. And then we've already seen a ton of wide receivers taken. I think was 7 in the first round. Jermaine wasn't among the top 10, but he's a guy that has played a ton of football, has good tape. And I think that, a team could take a flyer on him day three or day two. So I think those are the three: Kool-Aid, Braswell, and Burton that could come off the board today. We still haven't seen a running back drafted, so I think Jace will probably get moved to tomorrow if he does get picked up. And then I'll be interested to see what happens with Will Reichard because, of course, no specialist yet, not until Graham Nicholson gets in the draft. But I think that he has had a hell of a career. I think that he improved on his kickoff. So I'll be interested to see what happens day three with him. And then a Boygby. I think those are your guys right now I feel the safest about. You got Jalen Key, Trez Marshall, Darian Dalcourt still out there. But, those are the guys I think today and tomorrow that will most likely hear their name called.
With Kool-Aid and a Boygby, you got to think medicals have come into play. I mean, the
Yeah.
injury to Kool-Aid with the foot, just in a much more serious situation involving his neck a year ago, bounced back supremely from that. You're right about Jermaine Burton. Of the Alabama guys, I don't know if another one has had as much of a successful run through the draft process, certainly under the radar a little bit, than Jermaine Burton has. Because I had Jermaine kind of penciled rounds 5 through 7, kind of going into this thing. And now it looks like it's very realistic to think 2 through 4, which would be a couple of round jump for him if it in fact plays out that way. So we'll have all of the continuing draft coverage for you right there at BamaOnline.com. If you haven't already, like and subscribe to our podcast, our show here, our YouTube channel. Hit subscribe, turn on those notifications. You'll get all of our YouTube content as it drops. Hey, Charlie, let's get into some more transfer portal talk. This is a guy in Khalil Jacobs, the linebacker from South Alabama, that we had heard a lot about going back to January, right? Of course,
Mhm.
previously worked under Alabama defensive coordinator Kane Womack down there in Mobile. Kind of came and went, thought, well, maybe that window had closed there. But based on the last 24 hours, including a nugget from Tim Watts right there on our roundtable message board at BamaOnline.com, sounds like Khalil Jacobs, linebacker, could be in play for the Crimson Tide.
Yeah, and I know Alabama fans, or at least the guys on our board, are probably thinking another linebacker. But for right now, it makes a little bit of sense just because one, the familiarity with Kane Womack's system, that's got to be a plus for any defensive guy coming in. And we've seen guys in the portal that are be interesting to me what plays out from South Alabama and from Buffalo enter the portal
Mm-hmm.
from a defensive back standpoint of late. I think that could be advantageous. But just from Jacob's standpoint, he's a guy that has played 2 years in that system down at South Alabama. Last year, he had 56 tackles, 8.5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks. He's played in 20 plus college games. So he's a guy that for Alabama, they're good at the top of the inside linebacker pecking order. When you have Deontay Lawson and you have Jahad Campbell coming back, those are your dudes. But we saw last year, both of those guys missed time because of injury. And now you don't have Trez Marshall around. He's waiting to maybe hear his name called in the NFL draft. It's important to have that number 3 linebacker ready to go. And, that maybe people are going to be asking, well, what about Justin Jefferson? What about Jeremiah Alexander? I mean, they had a full spring to look at those guys to evaluate. And now, that they're targeting the guy in the transfer portal. So depth never hurts at positions like inside backer, defensive back, because not only are those guys going to maybe provide depth and play on the defensive side of the ball, but those are your special teams dudes too. So, if they feel like they have a spot and that's a guy that's familiar with Kane Womack's defense, I think it makes a little bit of sense.
I think if you're going there with Khalil Jacobs in late April, it's because you think he's legitimately a top 3 kind of guy for you at
Yeah,
inside linebacker, as you outlined. You're not going for a developmental guy.
no.
Because you do have Justin Jefferson that we saw work alongside Deontay Lawson in the A-Day game with Jahad Campbell out. So with Campbell and Lawson as your entrenched, you would think, top 2, you'd love to have a real deal number 3. And again, maybe that proves to be one of the guys that's been around at Alabama. Maybe it is one of the guys that we saw in the spring. I think there's optimism where a young player like Justin Okoronkwo is concerned, but he's going to need some time. I think your point about special teams is an excellent one too. There's some different boxes you can check with a guy like Khalil Jacobs if that's the route you choose to go, because in checking on him a little bit, he's played some Mike, he's played some Stinger. According to Kane Womack and some previous comments he's made about Jacobs, an excellent blitzer. And as Kane has talked about, they like to bring those inside linebackers on pressures and drop outside linebackers into coverage. So it makes sense if, in fact, this is the way it goes. I don't think it's entirely an indictment of Alabama's depth. I think they have some solid options. But again, if this is a guy they bring in, they're looking at him as starter caliber. Doesn't
Mhm.
mean he'll start with Campbell and Lawson in there, but Deontay, as we know, has had his injury issues. I think Jihad at times has been beaten up a little bit. So you got to have a legit third, no doubt
Yeah.
about that.
You've also got to look at it too. It could be it's not a situation where he comes in and maybe starts right away, but you could lose both Lawson and Campbell this year. And beyond that, there's not a ton of experience behind those guys. So to bring him in, if he's wanting to enter the portal now,
Yep.
it could be a move for next year as well.
Yeah, he's a third year guy coming up. So you got some time with him. Did play his first couple of seasons, I guess, at South Al. Had a really solid 2023. So we'll see how it goes with Khalil Jacobs. 6'2", 220-ish, I guess.
Mhm.
So physically stacks up with what you want at the Power 5 level. Be interesting to follow with us right there at BamaOnline.com. Hang out with us on the roundtable or premium message board. That's where you're going to learn everything you want to know about the Alabama Crimson Tide first from this guy, Charlie Potter, Tim Watts, Andrew Bone, Joseph Hastings, Clint Lamb, Jimmy Stein. We got you covered right there at BOL. Charlie, looking forward to these next couple of days of the NFL draft. And of course, we'll still be monitoring that transfer portal as well.
Yep, still a busy season, but it's been a lot of fun.
Been a lot of fun. A lot of fun always with Charlie here on our YouTube home. If you haven't already subscribed to the YouTube channel here, we would greatly appreciate that. For Charlie Potter, Travis Reier, thanking you once again. And until next time, so long, everybody.